2 weeks, that's all Sandra planned to stay in Willowbrook. But one look at Robert the boy she left behind and suddenly forever doesn't seem long enough. What happens when the life you built meets the love you abandoned? The old train station hadn't changed in 5 years. Sandra stepped onto the platform, her suitcase wheels clicking against the worn wooden planks, and breathed in the familiar scent of pine and distant rain. Willowbrook looked exactly as she'd left it, a small town cradled between rolling hills, where everyone knew everyone, and time moved like honey. She'd come back to settle her grandmother's estate, planning to stay just 2 weeks. That was the plan, at least, until she saw him standing by the flower shop across the street. Robert Hayes. Her chest tightened involuntarily. He was arranging chrysanthemums in the window display, his dark hair falling across his forehead the way it always had. 5 years had carved definition into his jaw, added breadth to his shoulders, but his hands moved with the same gentle precision she remembered. He'd taken over his mother's flower shop. Then, she'd heard about that. Sandra told herself to walk the other way. Instead, her feet carried her across the street. The bell chimed as she pushed open the door. Robert looked up, and for a moment, the world seemed to suspend itself. His eyes, deep brown, flecked with gold in the afternoon light, widened in recognition. Sandra, her name on his lips, felt like a question and an answer all at once. "Hey, Robert." She clutched her suitcase handle tighter, suddenly aware of how she must look after the long journey. "I didn't know you were running the shop now." 3 years. He set down the flowers, wiping his hands on his apron. I'm real sorry about your grandma. Mrs. Chin was an amazing woman." "Thanks." The words felt inadequate, but what else was there to say? How do you compress 5 years of silence into small talk? They stood there, separated by a counter full of roses and baby's breath, and Sandra felt the weight of everything unspoken pressing against her ribs. She'd left without saying goodbye. She had her reasons: a scholarship in New York, a chance to escape the small-town life that felt too small for her dreams. But standing here now, watching the hurt flicker across his face before he masked it with politeness, she wondered if any reason had been good enough. "You staying long?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. 2 weeks, maybe 3. Something flickered in his expression: hope, perhaps, or maybe just curiosity. "The whole town's different without you here." "I doubt that." She tried to smile. "I bet everything's exactly the same." "Not everything." His gaze held hers, and in that moment, Sandra felt 17 again, sitting on the hill behind the school, Robert's jacket around her shoulders, as they watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and rose. A customer entered, breaking the spell. Sandra seized the opportunity to escape, mumbling something about getting settled at her grandmother's house. But as she walked away, she could feel Robert's eyes on her back, and the weight of their unfinished story settled around her shoulders like a familiar, uncomfortable coat. That evening, Sandra unpacked in her grandmother's cottage, the same room she'd spent every childhood summer in. Through the window, she could see the old oak tree where she and Robert had carved their initials when they were 16. Time hadn't erased them. Letters were still there, weathered but permanent. Her phone buzzed, an email from her boss in New York, asking about a project deadline. The real world, calling her back already. But as Sandra stared at the screen, all she could think about was the way Robert had said her name, like it still meant something to him. She fell asleep that night wondering if coming home had been a mistake, or if perhaps it was exactly what she needed to do all along. The morning arrived wrapped in mist, the kind that clung to Willowbrook like a secret. Sandra woke to knocking at her door, persistent, familiar. When she opened it, Robert stood there with a bouquet of wildflowers and an uncertain smile. "I thought you might need these," he said, "for your grandma's garden." She always said wildflowers belonged in wild places, not flower shops. Sandra's heart did something complicated in her chest. "She did say that, didn't she?" "I also thought." He hesitated, shifting his weight. "I thought maybe we could talk. Really talk. There's a lot I never got to say." She should have said no, should have protected the careful distance she'd built. Instead, she found herself nodding. The hill," he confirmed. An hour later, they sat again in their old spot. The town spread below them like a watercolor painting. The morning sun burned away the mist, revealing the world in sharp, honest detail. "I was pretty ticked off for a long time." Robert said finally, his voice quiet but steady. When you left without saying goodbye, I thought what we had meant more than that. Sandra wrapped her arms around her knees. It did. That's why I couldn't say goodbye. I was scared that if I saw you, I wouldn't leave, and I had to leave. Robert, this town felt like it was swallowing me whole. I know, he plucked at the grass between them. I get that now, but back then, I just felt abandoned. The word hung between them, heavy with hurt. Sandra forced herself to meet his eyes. I'm sorry, I handled it terribly. I was young and scared, and I took the coward's way out. And now, Robert asked, you still scared? She considered this, terrified, but of different things. Like what? Like the fact that I've been back for one day, and already I'm questioning everything I've built in New York. My job, my apartment, my life there. One conversation with you and it all feels less solid than I thought. Robert was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached out and took her hand. His touch warm and familiar and completely overwhelming. I'd dated other people, tried to move on, but nobody ever felt right. It was like trying to force puzzle pieces that didn't fit. Robert, Sandra started, but he gently squeezed her hand. I'm not trying to guilt you or make you feel like you owe me anything. I just want you to know whatever happened between us, it wasn't nothing. It wasn't something I could just forget or replace. And if you're only here for 2 weeks, I get that. But I'd rather have 2 weeks of honesty with you than 5 more years of wondering what if. Sandra felt tears prick her eyes. What if 2 weeks makes everything harder? Maybe. He smiled, that crooked smile that had always undone her. Or maybe it gives us the closure we never got. Or maybe, he paused, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. Maybe it gives us a shot at starting over. No pressure, no expectations, just see what happens. They spent the rest of the morning talking, really talking, in a way they never had before. About Sandra's life in New York, the excitement and the loneliness, the success and the emptiness. About Robert's choice to stay in Willowbrook, to build a life in the place Sandra had fled, and how he'd found peace in it. About dreams and disappointments in the strange way life never quite turns out how you expect. When the sun climbed high, they walked back to town, still holding hands. It felt natural, inevitable, like something that had been waiting 5 years to happen again. Over the next week, they fell into a rhythm. Robert would close the shop early, and they'd explore Willowbrook together, places they'd loved as teenagers and new corners Sandra had never discovered. They had coffee at the new cafe by the river. They attended the town's summer festival, where Mrs. Patterson commented loudly about young love finding its way back and made them both blush. They Saturday in comfortable silence in Sandra's grandmother's garden, Robert teaching her how to properly care for the roses, while the evening painted everything gold. And slowly, the walls Sandra had built began to crumble. One evening, as they walked home under a sky full of stars, Robert stopped suddenly. I gotta tell you something, Sandra's heart stuttered. Okay, I'm not asking you to stay. I won't do that to you. Your life is in New York, and I respect that. But I need you to know. He cupped her face in his hands, his touch achingly gentle. I never stopped loving you, Sandra, and I don't think I ever will. The kiss, when it came, felt like coming home and setting off on an adventure all at once. It was everything their 17-year-old kisses had been, and everything they'd learned in the years apart, tender and passionate and bittersweet and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, Sandra was crying. I don't know what to do, she whispered. I don't know how to choose. Then don't, Robert said softly. Not tonight. Tonight, just be here with me. The rest, we'll figure out together. They walked hand in hand to her grandmother's cottage, and Sandra realized that maybe, just maybe, home wasn't a place you left behind. Maybe it was something you carried with you, and sometimes, if you were lucky, you found your way back to it. As she fell asleep that night, Robert's jacket around her shoulders and his steady breathing beside her, Sandra thought about choices and chances and the strange courage it took to let yourself be vulnerable. She didn't have all the answers yet, but for the first time in 5 years, she felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. The future was uncertain, full of difficult conversations and impossible decisions. But tonight, under the gentle watch of the stars she'd grown up beneath, Sandra allowed herself to simply feel, to love and be loved, to rest in this moment of perfect peace. And that She thought a sleep finally claimed her was more than enough.